Welcome to Waiting on the Trade, a monthly comics book club for people who can't keep up with monthly comics. I'm Matt Ledger.
I'm Patrick Fitzgerald Fleck.
And I'm Callum Smith.
This month, we're talking about My Love Story Volume 1, a manga by writer Kazune Kawahara and artist Aruko. So now, in case you guys need a refresher, because you didn't reread it at 10:30 at night yesterday like I did.
No.
Oh, no. My Love Story is the cutest manga you've ever seen, starring a bevy of wholesome people who just want each other to be happy and eat baked goods until they burst. Like, that's all they want.
It's so wholesome, it's painful at times. It's amazing.
Even, like, when you are like, hey, the catty sister is going to be here, and she's going to be catty.
I know.
She's
okay,
wholesome.
We'll get into it, but, they subvert so many character tropes. I love it.
Yeah, before we get into it, Cal, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I know Matthew, quite well. This is the first time that I've spoken to Pat, or I presume Pathu, before. So, and even more exciting because this is genuinely, I think, the perfect series. And yeah, I'm just genuinely delighted to get to chat to you guys about it.
I have been told it is the quote-unquote greatest comic.
And who told you that, Matt?
I think that was you, actually, yeah.
I was hoping that might have been somebody else, but no, it did sound like me.
No, this is like, when you were like, hey, we're going to read this comic, it was the first I'd heard of it. And when I looked it up, I was not inclined to believe that it was the perfect series, but like, I'm kind of inclined to believe you that it is the perfect series.
It's pretty close.
Yeah.
Before we get too far into the comic, for our listeners, myself, how did you guys actually meet each other? Because obviously, from our voices, you can tell there's some distance between us. So how did you guys meet? How'd that happen?
So in 2009,
Yep.
2009, both Matt and I were in Australia, West Australia, because we were both attending the same university out there. I think I was trying to remember this earlier, Matt, and sort of please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you and I met on the first night that both of us were in the country. We were in the flat, and it was just you and I at that point.
Yeah, it was just the two of us.
Yeah, but my recollection is that, sort of perhaps quite reasonably, because you've just done like a lot of traveling, that like I felt like I was sort of pestering you when I came into your room and just started like kept chatting to you, and sort of like going through your DVDs to sort of see what all that was about, and then. Yeah, and then I remember walking over to get some fish and chips on that first night.
Yeah, we almost immediately left to go to... We ended up going, I think, to that like little fish and chip and burger place kind of by the grocery store.
Yeah, in Sardinia, yes.
Yeah.
And I can remember sort of very quickly sort of realizing that both you and I had sort of like a shared love of comics, although sort of quite distinct types of comics.
We had common ground, I would say.
I can remember also, because this was sort of my first night at university as well, I can remember panicking a little bit and sort of trying to over-egg my knowledge of superhero comics, and sort of getting midway through a conversation with you where you were talking about Green Lantern, and I realized that I couldn't like although I'd read like a couple of like Jeff Johns ones, I couldn't name like a single character from them apart from Sinestro, which is weird. Hindsight, deeply weird. And I remember panicking about that and sort of trying to style it out. And anyway, that's my recollection of that.
I definitely don't remember you panicking, so you covered very well.
Oh, that's a relief, definitely.
Didn't notice him bringing Sinestro into all the conversations, just tying him in.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel that Cal has a deep and abiding love for Sinestro, so that makes sense.
Pretty great.
I mean, I do want to make sure that people don't think that that's like an admiration for Sinestro. But I think Sinestro Core War is one of like, I don't know. I think it's one of the best event comics I've ever read, and
yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, there's relatively few superhero comics that I feel particularly excited about these days, but that's one that I reread sort of relatively recently and was still like, oh yeah, that was good. Yeah, it is. So yes, anyway, that's how Matt and I met.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think somewhere in there, like the weird middle ground between my much more superhero-y taste, especially at the time, and your like a little bit more Vertigo-y. Is that accurate? Would you call that accurate?
It certainly was at the time. I think that there are almost no comics that I enjoyed at the point at which we first met that I would still read now. I think the last few years has been like a massive shift in my taste.
See, whereas my nostalgia is very strong. There are comics that I would reread again. But I think like the middle ground at that point was like that was right when the Grant Morrison, Frank Quitely Batman and Robin series started, like right near the end of us. Because I was reading Battle for the Cowl and it was absolute trash, and we both knew that at least.
Although that was the period where there was the Secret Six story where everybody's like looking at Dick Grayson's bum in that one issue where Catman and Deadshot are working out whether or not they could replace Batman. I remember some very
which is
nice
good. That at least was something good out of that series.
Although I have been sort of like increasingly drifting away from like a lot of sort of superhero things. I think weirdly there's been a lot of kind of like Dick Grayson adjacent stuff in the last few years that's like really stood out as being a big hit to me. So there was like the Nightwing series. I did really enjoy the who was it by? Was that it wasn't Tom King, was it? It was
Tim Seeley.
Tim Seeley, that's right. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the Midnighter series a few years ago as well, which also had like a great deal of Dick Grayson's bum in that as well.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it's been a good few years for Dick Grayson's ass.
It has. So anyway, yes, yeah, but sorry to skip back. Yeah, I think I don't know. Yeah, I used to be very Vertigo-y, and to be fair, Vertigo doesn't, has not been like a consistent sort of presence on, like, the stands for a few years. But I think increasingly I have sort of gravitated away from things like that to things like My Love Story, not just in terms of kind of like manga or specifically shoujo manga, but I think things that are just kind of like rampant like compassion. I think that is 100% my jam at the moment.
Now we're going to be throwing some terms around for people that may not know. Manga and shoujo you just used. Do you want to like define those for the people?
Yeah, absolutely. So manga it's kind of like the main form, sort of most popular form of kind of comics that are published in Japan. There's a massive kind of range and variety within that in terms of like the kind of like art style and like content that you might find within it, the kind of genres that it encompasses, the kind of demographics that it sort of caters to. Shoujo manga sort of refers to it's a really broad term. Typically, it refers to sort of comics that are marketed at kind of young women. But like within that, there can be sort of like a really broad range of kind of subgenres within that. So you can have things like sort of romance, slice of life, a lot of horror. Manga is also shoujo manga. So I don't know if you guys know Junji Ito. He's probably one of the most famous horror manga. His the vast majority of his work was initially published in shoujo manga magazines. So there is like a really broad range of it, and I think it's probably worth noting as well that maybe in contrast to a lot of kind of Western comics where sort of the most visible stuff at the very least, like the majority of visible stuff is kind of catered towards a male audience, and like the vast majority of kind of mainstream publishing outside of things like Reina Tellegmeier is sort of catering to this kind of male audience. Within manga, sort of shoujo manga is sort of substantially bigger, or there is far more published in that every year than there is in sort of things that cater towards male audiences. So I was looking this up the other day, and in 2017, which was like the most recent sort of year that I could find figures for, there were like 40 shoujo sort of magazines on the stand. So these are magazines that will have multiple different kind of stories from different writers and artists within each of them. So there's 40 of those sort of shoujo ones compared to 27 for magazines that are aimed at boys, so which is known as shonen manga.
Yep. Yeah, I've read some of the shonen stuff.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's I find that interesting.
Yeah, I do too. And like I looked up the definition too, and apparently it comes from like man is rambling and aimless, and ga is picture, so it would be rambling, aimless picture.
Yeah.
Which is not, I think, quite what it is.
It's not, but I think that's also some slightly suggestive of the kind of like the very. I think it's quite common for there to be sort of like a very specific kind of visual dynamism to manga that isn't necessarily always like as commonplace in kind of Western comics. And I think one of the things that I find interesting about My Love Story is that even though that is, like a very grounded kind of slice of life story that's just this sort of very low key relationship, sort of just between some teenagers, there's still like a huge amount of visual dynamism to it that is like honestly like very exciting and reliably very funny, I find, as well within the book.
Yeah, I found myself just like laughing at page like on the page turner during like a panel transition much
The
more
facial
than
expressions. Yes.
yeah, that too, just like more I think laughs per page than any other comic I've read, and a lot of that is through the pacing and the transitions and stuff.
So should we talk a little bit then about sort of the basic premise of the book? Because I think that kind of ties into some of that inherent humor as well, and like where a lot of that comedy comes from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like I was actually looking at this rambling, aimless thing, and I think for manga overall, maybe it's not a great definition, but like for this book, it kind of is. Whereas this book isn't aimless, but it is kind of rambling, right? Like
it's hard to say. So I mean, like so the overall story, like within this first volume and across the whole sort of 13-volume series, is this kind of low key relationship between Takeo Goda, who is this kind of like giant hulking sort of. I mean, he's sort of. But this giant hulking boy who's kind of frequently referred to as like a gorilla, right? Or like looking like a gorilla. Or like an ogre or something. And
he gets bigger as the book goes on too.
Yes.
And I think he gets even bigger in the volumes as they carry on.
Absolutely. And so you've got him, you've got his best friend, Sunakawa. Is that, have I got that right?
Yep.
Yes.
Suna is sort of, I suppose he looks much more like a traditional kind of like central figure of a like a romance manga, where he is sort of tall, slender, sort of very pretty, kind of slightly androgynous look, and then the two of them sort of encounter Yamato, who is a sort of seemingly kind of delicate young girl their age as well. And it's about this sort of like very intense romance that develops between Takeo and Yamato. And honestly, it makes me so happy. I was trying to think of like some of the things that make this book sort of feel really unique to me, and why this is the one that I chose to talk about, and why I feel so passionate about other people reading it. And I think part of that is because it is genuinely quite a subversive book in like a lot of respects, and not that sort of starts off with kind of having Takeo as the protagonist. He is in no way kind of like a conventional sort of romantic lead, not only because he has this kind of like sort of hulking physique, and sort of a lot of the characters in the book initially sort of seem to find him quite grotesque, although sort of I think he's not drawn in a way that kind of like mocks him, but there is this kind of just like extreme masculinity to his physique that
like he stands out in a way that most, like you were talking about with Suna, like most characters in these sorts of books would not.
Yeah, absolutely. But like that is then contrasted with this kind of extreme kind of like emotional sensitivity, and
so caring. He's so soft. I love it.
He's reading 17 magazine just because he knows he's dense.
I love that.
What a guy.
And I think there's a degree of kind of just like this kind of reflexive desire to be kind and considerate as well, like all the time. So it's
also like be better, right? Like improve, like throughout the course of the first volume, to the point where he like he is very like conscious of the fact that he's sometimes dense and like needs to work at understanding what Yamato wants.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I obviously don't want to stray too much into talking about kind of the rest of the series, but one of the things that is particularly gratifying to me as the series progresses is that kind of desire and emphasis on kind of self-improvement and self-understanding stays like a really central feature of the story. And although I think at first blush a lot of the characters seem sort of quite two-dimensional, there is just like this increasing depth where you see how Takeo sort of responds to things, to self-doubt, or sort of like understanding how to be kind of like a good friend and in a relationship at the same time, or how he deals with jealousy, or sort of things like this. And there is this kind of just constant like interrogation of what it means to be sort of like a good, considerate person, in a way that I find genuinely so exciting and interesting. And like, I don't think I've seen anywhere else. Like the closest that I could compare him to is probably the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
Yeah, no, that's a solid recommendation, like a solid comparison, I think.
Yeah, I find that just really exciting, and even within this first volume, as you were saying, Matt, like you can see that he has the desire to kind of improve himself and sort of to be better. Like there is like a very specific kind of consistently just really direct approach that he has to everything. So you can see towards the end of the book where he realizes that he needs to learn how to kiss, or that he wants to learn how to kiss.
My God, that final panel where he's holding Suna's face,
Yes.
and the look on, oh God, it made me laugh so hard.
Oh, it's so good. And it's just, I don't know, like I genuinely find that really inspiring. Like I think that
you think that it's really inspiring that someone's going to saran wrap their friend's face?
It's just so like he
We're
wants to
gonna
learn how to kiss, and like the only person he trusts enough that wouldn't like freak out.
Yeah,
or like rat him out. Quote
Yeah,
unquote.
like it's this embarrassing thing that he needs to like practice, but he knows his best friend will be there for him, and he's gonna just do it because it's great.
So like 2 pages before that, Takeo has these eyes that are like the exact same eyes as Victor Zsasz in the last Arkham, like serial killer eyes.
So the serious face that he makes, oh God.
Yeah.
Facial expressions in this book are amazing.
They're fantastic,
Yeah.
aren't they? And that is sort of like a common characteristic within manga, right? This kind of like extreme elasticity of kind of human form, like right down to sort of the facial expressions. But I think because Takeo is starting from like quite an exaggerated point from the get-go, and sort of nobody else in the book is drawn in that kind of unreal sort of way.
Yeah, and like his eyebrows are always like really like in the close-ups, just like scratched in, basically, like to the point where other people's are not. Like he's very set apart from the rest of the people in the book in a way that draws attention to him, but not without, I guess, like you were saying, like not without mocking him or like over exaggerating him. I don't think, except for maybe in a couple bits.
And then just the sort of the scale of him next to everybody else, like he looks, although the art style is like very consistent, like he looks as though he's come from another series. Like it looks, I don't know, yeah. Oh God, I love it so much.
Just, the fact that he wears his emotions like on his skin. If there's something bothering Takeo, you can tell. You can tell what the man is thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that combined with, you get this kind of like really sort of articulate and hyperbolic inner monologue all the time as well. So he's the narrator, and like this, I mean, this only ramps up throughout the series as well. But just kind of you constantly get these kind of just like surges of emotion coming through, like not only in the art but in this like through his inner monologue as well. And it's just, I don't know, like it's so unashamed of like just feeling big feelings. And
I specifically wanted to talk about how, like, in manga, there's the thing where you do, like, the dramatic zoom in, because most of the stuff I've read is, like, Shonen Jump style manga, and it's all, like, action-based. Like, whenever you do that, it's something just, like, super dramatic, usually. And in this, whenever they do that, it's just something either, like, incredibly wholesome or hilarious. And I would just, like, the contrast makes me laugh every time, no matter, like, what's going on. So I opened up my iPad where I was reading it last night, and it just happened to be on the page where he gets the first like animated text message from Yamato, and he's like, "It's animated."
It's animated. And then he sends back the thumbs up.
The texting in this story is like one of the most reliably funny things that I think I've read in any comic. And again, it's just like the comedy in it is, there's so many sort of like different kind of running jokes that go throughout the whole sort of the book and the series. And one of my absolute favorite running jokes is that Yamato, this girl that he's seeing, will send him these kind of like very ornate, sort of like articulate, lengthy sort of text messages that you get to see that are full of kind of like emojis. And Takeo's responses are reliably maybe just like one word.
Like 4 words, a period, and a thumbs up emoji.
It's so good. I think my favorite one is sort of towards the end of the book where she's sort of talking about like whether or not she can still wish on a star.
Yes.
And here we go. I'm going to read it out. So the stars are beautiful tonight. I saw a shooting star for the first time in my life. I was just thinking about you. I hope that we'll stay together for a long time. The star's gone already. Can I still make a wish? And you have to imagine, if you're listening at home, but there are just a liberal kind of sprinkling of emojis throughout all of this. And then you get to see Takeo's reply, which is just, you still can, full stop. It's so good. Oh, it's so good. I really love it. And I think that one of the things that really stands out to me in the series is that, and I think Pat, you were touching on this before, is that there is just this like wealth of like affection and compassion for every single character. So I think you mentioned Suna's sister, who is kind of positioned in this first book as a rival to Yamato for her, for the affections of Takeo.
You look at Suna at the beginning, and you just think he's a stereotypical pretty boy, and you feel like he's sort of cold to Takeo. I didn't like him in the beginning. It's like, oh god, why is he like
trying to figure out Suna's deal is what I spent the majority, well, not the majority, but like a good portion of my time doing the first read through was like, what is Suna's deal? I don't understand him completely. I get most of him, but not all of him, I don't think. He
coldly like turns away all the girls that obviously Takeo has feelings for. And like the fact that you don't know up until the end of the first half of volume 1 that he's doing it because they made fun of Takeo, and it's because he's a good friend that he doesn't want to have anything to do with these girls who are mean to him. It hit me hard. It was like, oh my god, he actually loves Takeo. It's not because he's like a sociopath. It's great. And in some ways, the same thing with his sister, where she comes in and is like, oh, it's the stereotypical older sister who has the like stereotypical attractiveness. But no, she actually has strong feelings for Takeo because Takeo early on like proved how loving he was to her. It's like great.
I love it so much, and I think with Suna, he is sort of visually and sort of like initially in terms of his characterization, like a very stereotypical kind of lead for a shonen, shoujo manga, I would say, and that comes across in that kind of coldness, that sort of aloofness, and again, I think in a lot of other shoujo mangas that I've read, including ones that I've really enjoyed, he would be sort of a kind of like a problematic figure, I would say, because it is not uncommon, I think, in this sort of within this genre to have somebody like Suna be there, and they're very cold and very sort of distant towards women who will just consistently throw themselves at them anyway, and then sort of 12
would tsundere be the right term?
Yeah,
I've got so many tabs open for the show notes, you guys.
I love that within this story, A, he's not the lead, and B, very quickly you do get this just kind of, you understand like where the warmth and the love within him is, and he's not just this kind of remote figure that just kind of exists in a bubble. Like he has an inner life that you get an insight into very quickly.
I think between him and like how he develops throughout this volume, and also I'm not sure how to pronounce her name actually. Is it A? His sister? Like
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
A?
I maybe.
Like between those two characters and like what you find out about them in this volume, like it really quickly affirms to me that the whole series is just going to be people that are watching out for each other. Because like Ai is supposed to be a rival for Takeo's affections, and then by the end she's like helping them solve their relationship issues.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, she just steps aside, realizing that she didn't pursue it when she has the chance, and they obviously have something good. And she's not going to be like in any other series. She would like try to force them.
Yeah, she'd be trying to like pull them apart for sure.
Which is oh god, I'm so tired. I'm exhausted. I just want a cute story. I don't want to have will they,
well, you
won't
got
they.
It. Here we are, Pat. We have it.
I think one of the things that is really gratifying to me as the series progresses is that it maintains that kind of optimism and kindness, but it does also sort of increasingly introduce complexity as well. So you see these characters who are sort of consistently compassionate and considerate being placed in situations where they, there are sort of imperfect solutions to some of the challenges they're facing, and it's sort of without losing that kind of warmth and brightness, it does do genuinely interesting things about sort of challenging, I suppose, like the potential simplicity in that worldview. Like it's not, sort of just being sweet isn't sufficient, and like you do see the characters kind of putting in hard work as the series progresses, and I think you see the seeds of that planted sort of very early on in this series, where you have Takeo sort of perhaps not understanding the best way, the most kind of considerate or empathetic way to sort of be physically intimate with a partner. And sort of within this first volume, that doesn't extend beyond holding hands. But yeah, I don't know. Like I think
it does extend to kissing.
Well, yes. But it's, I don't know. It's like I really appreciate the fact that it is, it's not simplistic despite being sweet. I suppose it's probably the best way I can sum it up.
In that way, it felt like very Steven Universe-y to me, actually, which I know, Pat, you've watched. But Cal, have you watched Steven Universe?
I have, yes. Yeah. It's not a comparison that I thought of, but I think that's really appropriate one.
The heart is there for sure, yeah.
Which actually, like, Kat had mentioned that as she was reading it, so I want to make sure I give her credit for that. But, like, it definitely rings true to me that, like, it's very, I don't know, it's the same sort of world where people are, for the most part, trying to build each other up rather than, like, tear each other down.
Mm-hmm. And this is, sorry, I suppose, one thing that's maybe worth noting is, so Kat, your wife, Matt,
Kat, my wife, who read all 13 volumes of this within a week, would given the first one. Yes, that's her.
And I was absolutely delighted to hear that as well.
You have no idea how hard it was for me to not, like, I read to volume 2 because I didn't even read the next one.
I had to fight not to read anything. I'm so.
But like, we're sitting on the bed. I'm reading, like, I don't know, whatever book I was reading at the time, and Kat's just sitting next to me with the iPad, like, giggling. And like, that's part of why I couldn't do my notes, was because I wanted to read it again to do my notes, and Kat had the iPad the whole time because she was reading the next 12 volumes, which are all very good, apparently.
Yeah, it maintains its quality, definitely. And and I think it is. I don't know. It's such an easy read. It's so, like, the characters are so fun, and despite the fact that, I mean, there's not like a strong plot structure, you're mostly just sort of spending, just time with these characters as their relationships progress. But then within that, I don't know, there is like an awful lot of incident, and it keeps sort of ticking over. I think the pacing is particularly good as well. Like it's, I don't know, it feels like it's always moving somewhere, even if that is just, working out.
I don't know if it's something about like the page size or the typical panel like composition or what, but for me, manga like always move at like a faster pace than traditional American comics. I'm not sure exactly what it is, if it's just the actual structure of the page, or if it's just the way they're set up, or the fact that they're serialized as like those shorter chapters usually in like weekly formats before getting collected like this.
Yeah.
But to me, like, I always push through one of these way faster than I push through like a comparable number of pages of a American comic or something like that.
I think is interesting as well, isn't it? Because it's, I think I associate manga with quite sort of decompressed storytelling as well.
Oh yeah, those 82 volumes of One Piece or whatever there are.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think you're right. It does. There is kind of just like a lightness to them as well that makes them sort of very easy just to kind of breeze through. May I ask, like, have either of you, like, what other kind of romance comics have either of you read?
That's a toughie. I was actually trying to think of this the other day, and I did not get very far. It's outside my normal genres, Cal. I'll give you that. Oh, okay. I turned around. I'm looking at Sex Criminals. I would count that.
Yeah. No, that's 100% a romance comic, I would say.
Could we include Saga?
Yeah. I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I think
put you in the ballpark there. Yeah.
I mean, Sex Criminal count. Come on.
Sex Criminals is like mostly about the actual relationship. Saga's
a saga about the relationship.
Mostly about the relationship. I'll give it to you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Comics, romantic comics, not so much, but I am an anime fan, and I've watched a few.
Oh yeah, what's the name of the one that we started watching at your house when I was there a little while ago?
My big recommendation, if you like this, would be to watch Wotakoi, which is Love is Hard for an Otaku. It's very similar in tone to this. It's about two nerds who find each other as office workers, and one is really into cosplay and one is really into video games, and basically they just form a relationship because you can't find other otakus who like respect your otaku. So it's cute. It's great.
I'm going to look for that.
Yeah, you should. I think you would love it. It is a manga as well. It started off as a web comic, but it's been picked up and it's got 3 volumes. So look for it. Also, the anime is great. The opening is fantastic.
Okay.
Otherwise, yeah, I've watched a couple other romance. Violet Evergarden, which is on Netflix, which is like really, really heavy romance. Like you're going to cry every single episode.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But yeah, I've watched a few. But for sure, the more wholesome is what I prefer.
Yeah, definitely, and I think this is. I mean, so there are, both in terms of kind of like Western and sort of manga. Western comics and manga. There's, I think, in the last couple of years, I have sort of like really gravitated towards kind of romance comics, and I think this is by far kind of like the most enjoyable one that I've read. There's a lot of other ones that are really good. I think in terms of Western ones that I'd sort of shout out. Did either of you guys read or see Twisted Romance that came out last year? It was like an anthology series. I think it won an Eisner.
I was gonna say I've heard it's very good. I don't think I've actually read any of it though.
It is absolutely fantastic. It's like genuinely like creative, fun, sort of at times like legitimately quite sexy stuff. That's, I don't know, just draws on like a really broad, interesting range of creators. That's really good. I'd also, like, in terms of the Western things, I'd really strongly recommend reading Jack Kirby's young romance comics. They are
those good?
I mean, they're absolutely honest. If that's what you're asking, they are like absolutely. They are of a different time, and they are like written and kind of like. So yeah, they're written with the same kind of like bombast that you would you might have grown to expect from like fourth world stories,
or like a Captain America Jack Kirby.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but instead of punching Nazis, it's like smooching guys.
Smooching Nazis.
No, absolutely no Nazis smooched in those comics.
That's good.
But it's the same ferocity, I would say.
I'm looking at the cover for one right now. It's just like so I don't know. No, Linda, we can't go on like this. You know I'm engaged to your kid sister, Jane. But darling, Jane is a child. She doesn't have the fire to kindle the spark of your genius. You need me, John. And then Jane is coming in the door and she says, "Oh, John."
Yeah, I mean, so
does that sound right?
It does, and that has made me look sort of very longingly at my shelf, and I'm definitely going to be rereading one of those volumes later tonight. Because they are,
nice.
Like,
if you have a specific one you recommend, Cal, you should drop it in the Discord, and I'll make sure to put it in the show notes.
Okay, all right, yeah, no, that sounds good. I'll do that. And then, yeah, I don't know. And then, sort of within kind of like other manga ones, have either of you guys heard of Tokyo Tarariba Girls?
No, I don't think so.
It's really fun. I'd really strongly recommend it. And it provides like a really kind of different. Sort of approach to romance, I would say. So it's following these 3 kind of like nearly 30-something women who are all single and are all sort of determined to be in relationships by the sort of Tokyo, by the next Olympics in Tokyo. It's kind of it's following them and their kind of like travails as they sort of try to accomplish that goal. But it's really funny, really. Sort of emotionally insightful, I would say, and yeah, I don't know. It's not as joyful as this one because literally nothing is as joyful as my love story. But I'd recommend it very, very highly, nonetheless. But yeah, sorry, I'm flicking through it again, and it's just, I don't know. It's just there's so much that I think is like really lovely about it, and I think that there's something that's like massively resonant to me about this book, where there is this just kind of constant drive to be kind, and sort of people really sort of thinking about like the best way that they can do that. And I think, I've sort of, speaking personally, I've had an emotionally turbulent few years, and I think that there is something that's so clear-sighted about kind of the characters in this book, where they will go through sort of troubles and sort of trials and tribulations themselves, but just sort of maintain this focus on just kindness and compassion. And I don't know, it's I struggle to think of many books that have like affected me emotionally and intellectually as much as this one, and as I can think of fewer things where I want to kind of embody some of the themes and actions of the characters. And I think there's been sort of times where I have very specifically sort of tried to think like, what would Takeo do in a given situation? And it's genuinely not a bad kind of heuristic to apply to any given situation.
Yeah, I would agree. To the point where, like, when I was coming here for this podcast recording, I was like, what would Takeo do? Because we're still cleaning our old apartment, and I'm back at the new one doing, because the internet's there, and Kat, my wife, is at the old apartment cleaning, and I was like, this is not what Takeo would do. You would have figured something better out.
Well, at least you recognize that's the wrong thing to do. So
We're
that's
gonna
a
go
step.
out for lunch or something.
It's
I'm gonna figure something out. But yeah, I would say like the same way. Like, it's just, I don't know. I tried to scroll back and find the page that I think has my favorite subversion of the dramatic character yelling panel that you get in manga. And it's where Takeo's talking to Suna, and they're like getting into it, and I think it's because Takeo's like, oh, Yamato's in love with you, Suna, and Suna's like, obviously she's not, dude, chill out. And he basically like yells at Suna that he's cool. Like, that's his dramatic thing. He's like, you are cool. Like, that's such, it's so different than you would find in any other manga.
Quietly saying thanks afterwards is great.
There's really good use of the manga like sneaky word balloon like trope in here, where there's like tiny text or text off in the background. There's really good use of it for really good jokes.
I think one of my favorite things sort of progressing through the series as well beyond this book is that you can see that there's a lot more ambition added into the art as it goes along. So it was interesting for me to revisit this first volume, because Takeo's look changes sort of quite considerably as the book goes along. So he definitely becomes like physically larger as the book goes along. And he becomes a lot less angular as well. There's like a lot more kind of softness to him, and I think there's also, he is sort of frequently like more and more of like a kind of elastic sort of cartoonish character, and that is just, I don't know, it's such a consistent joy as it goes along. Like there's a feature, like I don't think it's even that far into the series, where occasionally during sort of intense romantic moments, you'll see kind of like little cherubs with kind of physique and face sort of like appearing at various junctures. And I don't know, just like it really, really, really feels as though the creators are having a lot of fun with the book.
They're definitely messing around, right? Like, you get the word balloons even in this one that have like lightning storms in them, essentially.
Yes,
those are super cool.
I mean, and sort of when you look at the sort of the moment sort of towards the end of this first volume where Takeo is insisting that he needs to practice to kiss so that he can be good at this for Yamato. I mean, he looks like he's about to like fuck like Sooner up. Like, he looks like like a breadstick. Like, it's just I don't know, just this like the kind of intense line work on that page, and like you say,
the hyper detail is just so great.
Oh, it's so much fun. Just like everything about it is fun. Like, it's, I don't know, I think just sort of like page for page, no better comic, I strongly believe. I mean,
no funnier comic I would give you, at least, for sure. Like, so many the bit where Takeo's like wandering around and he falls in the sewer, and soon as like, are you stuck? Like, There's just so many good gags. Like almost every page has a good gag, or it's doing some dramatic stuff, which
When
will
Suna-
eventually lead to a good gag.
Yeah, when Suna lends him his uniform because he jumped into a river to save a child,
Yeah,
and then he's walking around with these tiny, like he's obviously doesn't fit in the clothes, but
Yeah,
he's just
barely
walking
fits in
around. Oh, great! It's great.
I mean, are there? I mean, this is a like a comic that reliably makes me laugh out loud. Are there any other like comics that you guys read that like actually physically make you laugh whilst you're reading them?
I've had some that not the frequency of this is much higher than anything else I've read.
So we bought the last volume of Sex Criminals that came out, I guess volume 5 in Portland, because it was like last year and it like just come out. So I bought it from the cool like block, like it takes up an entire block, this bookstore in Portland. So I bought it and I was reading it on the like public transit back to the airport because Kat was staying for another couple days for work and I was going back. And I definitely like slid into my seat a little bit and just like started like laughing and hoped that people didn't think I was insane or like would look at the title of the book. So I've had that. I definitely took this. I started rereading it Friday at lunch and I took it out of the office because I didn't want to start laughing in the office like a madman.
But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think it is relatively unusual, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Just like okay, here's my question to you guys. My love story. Is there anything that it can't do? I mean,
is there anything it can't do?
Yeah.
Well, coming from my shonen background, there is no like alien invasion or like the world's not going to be destroyed.
But like, could it do it though? I think
could it throw it in there?
Yeah, I mean, like, could it do it and would the series not break? I think
the series would break it. Like, I think its wholesomeness, like the fact that it is a simple story, is what.
But what if the aliens showed up and they were wholesome? Like, what if
Yeah.
it worked?
And they fall in love with Takeo? Like, no.
There's something that I really enjoy that like is another like running joke that sort of progressively developed through the series where Takeo will just like resolve crises just sort of like really quickly. So you see it in this one obviously a couple of times, like one where he catches this kind of falling beam or saves a child from a river.
There's a cat in a tree and they just walk along and they see Takeo.
What are you doing? This cat was caught in a tree.
No, like Suna's not even surprised though, right? Like Suna's like barely even shocked.
Yes.
Because he's known Takeo for years, right? Like this is just
this is probably the 16th time he's seen this happen. Yeah.
And I think like I really love that as well, like the way that kind of that these acts of like I think acts of kind of like boldness or heroism that they're just treated in such like a matter of fact way. So I suppose my point being that were there to be an alien invasion, Takeo would absolutely resolve it probably within 2 panels and then they just carry on to like the cake shop.
Yeah, it could totally just be like, you know how Sunday Funny Comics have those like 2 panels you can kind of cut out based on like whether the newspaper has enough space for them or not. Like you just put it at the very front of a chapter, solve it, and it'd be done, and you could totally fit it in.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. Yeah, I think it could handle it, definitely.
And then there would just be background gags for like the next 10 pages about like the TV saying alien crisis solved by local teenager or something like that.
Like, yeah, the comedy and like the way that they treat, the way that they treat action, like I really love as well, because it is, I think that they take full advantage of the fact that Takeo has this kind of physique that is from another book. Like he is, you know, as we've already described. I mean, he's sort of almost like the Hulk, right? Like he's got that kind of physique compared to.
Sure, he's like thuggish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But like one thing that like I really also appreciate, and this is just absolutely ramped up as the books go along, is that you get this kind of very weirdly wholesome kind of female gaze on his body as well. Like he is just like absolutely jacked, and you start to see it in the first volume as well that has like an effect on Yamato as well. Like you can see her kind of blushing anytime he has to, you know, sort of take
his
off
jacket.
Yeah, when he changes clothes, like Pat was saying, to the short jacket, she definitely gives him a look.
Yeah.
The I and Yamato like discussing the things they find attractive about him were great.
Yeah.
Like, oh, and his chest. I know his chest is so great, and his hands. Yeah, his hands are just so sexy.
I really love that. Like, I love how, again, just like how earnest and yeah, sort of wholesome it is, even when they are just sort of like talking about basically like what a piece of meat
Yeah.
because I don't
Well,
know.
like it doesn't because it. I don't know if it's on like if it's something that this writer particularly can just do, which I'm gonna look her up again. Which for a while I thought this was written by a man, and then found out it was written by a woman, which is both good and like kind of sucks at the same time because it'd be nice if there was a man that could write about relationships like this.
Right.
But Kazune Kawahara, but like all the stuff that it for a second looks like it could trip over into not being wholesome, or maybe repeat some of the stuff that manga I have read that does relationships does, and like they don't treat their female characters very kindly, and like the relationships are not stuff that you would want to emulate in your own life a lot of the times. Like anytime it even like comes close to nudging up against that, it deflects immediately. It's still just wholesome. Yeah.
And I think like that's one of the things that I feel. So there's two strands of that I find particularly encouraging in this. Yeah, like within this first volume and then across the whole series. And so the first one is when Takeo and Yamato, so they're officially in a relationship at this point, but they are sort of very physically reserved. And Takeo sort of initially his plan is just to sort of like sort of take it wildly slow, never touch her, sort of just he has.
Yeah, to him they're just gonna hang out until they stop hanging out, which is never in his eyes.
And like, but there is a form of kind of chivalry that exists within his head that that initially sort of doesn't necessarily consider how Yamato herself feels.
Yeah,
it's not uncommon within sort of romance stories for there to be kind of this extreme passivity in the sort of female, or like the women in those stories. And you very quickly sort of get some more insight into what Yamato's going through, where she's like, "Oh no, I want him to touch me." Like,
like she's the one who takes the lead in a way that is still like very wholesome and like true to the character too.
And that's something that I think is absolutely like a necessary component of understanding why this book is so fantastic and so just genuinely positive. And I think it is because although the story is situated within Takeo's head, or it's his head that you get the most insight into, Yamato still absolutely has agency, and she's not just this kind of sweet, sort of delicate, kind of childlike figure, that is just having romance acted upon her. Like she is absolutely like a
she's the one taking the actions, because Takeo doesn't have any idea what he would like he should do in a relationship at all. Like she's the one who hid her phone in his apartment so that they could meet up again, right?
Yeah. Which I don't know. So I really love that, and I think, and then the other strand of it is that I genuinely think that this book in general, but sort of Takeo in particular as a character, presents like the most positive form of masculinity that I've ever seen in fiction. I think, and a bit, and that's he's not sort of static in that necessarily. So I think you are constantly seeing him sort of want to understand himself and the people around him better, and to kind of develop himself. So you see that within this one, where as I was saying just before, initially he has this idea that to be like a good partner, he just shouldn't touch her, doesn't want to I suppose be presumptuous or sort of too forward in the relationship, but then sort of very quickly sort of accepts and understands that it's about like listening to what the other person wants. Like that's how you progress. And then there's so many instances of that kind of interaction and development over the course of the series. And I think, I don't know, I've just genuinely never seen another masculine figure in a story that has this level of kind of positivity and consideration to them. And I think I would be confident in saying that across the entire series, there's literally nothing that he does that I would associate with kind of toxic masculinity, or sort of, which is again not very rarely the case in romance sort of comics or manga. I would say.
Yeah, like to the point where I'm trying to think of some of the more like viz action oriented manga I've read, and I'm trying to think if there's like a relationship that I would even like comes close to this level of wholesomeness and both partners participating on the same level. And I'm coming up pretty blank here.
Well, like the romantic animes that I've watched, there's like the tropes, like the kabedon, which is basically when the male protagonist, or sometimes a female, but they basically pin their love interest against the wall with their arms on either side, and it's like portrayed as a really romantic, like aggressive, like move, like, oh, I love you, and I'm going to show it, but like.
It's apparently a very popular means of expressing romantic love or adoration, according to Google.
Everywhere. But Takeo would never do that. Like, that would be overstepping the bounds he would feel with Yamato. And that's just like, it's so pure. And I love him for that.
Yeah. And it's pure without being chaste necessarily.
Right.
Like it's very clear that there is kind of like physical desire and and you see this as the series goes along. There is a particularly entertaining volume sort of not far into the series where Takeo and Yamato are both sort of trying to deal with being like massively horny at the beach the first time, because it's the first time. And like, so Takeo is just sort of swimming like at the speed that you would associate with like a speedboat up and down the beach. I've got a tunnel somewhere, and it's like so like I really appreciate that about it as well. Like, it's not, you know, it's not denying kind of like some of the complexities or like realities of like intense attraction to other people, but it's just it's all about these characters learning how to channel that into like a really positive, compassionate sort of outlet.
I don't think I've ever been so excited to like read a comic where people are just going to be horny at the beach.
I should have guessed there would be a beach episode. There always is.
There's always a beach episode, Pat.
Yeah. That's great.
The beach episode is, it's very interesting. But I don't know. That's the case with like genuinely everything. I think there are no lulls whatsoever in the series going forwards. Like, I think it's something where it's been interesting to me going back to this first one. Not just because like the art style I think gets a lot more ambitious as it goes along, but just the characters become so much richer as you progress through the series. But like the quality is absolutely constant across the whole series as well, and it's just, I don't know. I think it's a treasure. Like, it's even like it's definitely sort of like a popular and successful shoujo manga, but it's by no means kind of like one of the biggest or sort of like, you know, most well regarded ones. But I think, I don't know, it boggles my mind that it's not just sort of like the most popular comic that's ever existed, because I can't imagine anybody that wouldn't like it. I think it's just, there's so much joy and it's so accessible that, I don't know. I can't wrap my head around sort of anybody reading this and not being immediately charmed by sort of basically everything in it.
So, Cal, have you read anything by Kazune Kawahara or Aruko other than this?
I have, yes. So I've read other stuff by Kazune Kawahara. So she did another sort of like really popular series called High School Debut, which is massively enjoyable, really, really fun, but is perhaps a lot more of like a traditional kind of shoujo manga. So that is, so the protagonist in that one is like a girl at school who is vaguely similar to Takeo in some respects, in that she is sort of cool in a very specific way. So she's really sporty, sort of doesn't have kind of like an immediate intelligence with romance, but is, you know, sort of is still sort of popular, well liked, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, and she's getting sort of coaching in how to sort of, you know, be a romantically attractive figure from somebody who's not unlike Suna, I suppose. So
He looks Suna-ish. I googled it quick.
Right. Okay. Yes. Yeah. And it follows like a much more kind of standard template, I suppose, of her sort of generally breaking through his kind of cold exterior as the series progresses, and the two of them gradually falling in love. Which is it's a good series. It's good and fun, but it's not. It does not feel nearly.
It's not this.
My Love Story. It's not, no. Right. You just reminded me of something else that I love about My Love Story, which is just that it gets to the chase with everything straight away. So there is like a really the issue of Yamato and Takeo sort of understanding that they are attracted to each other,
Yes.
sort of, and that they want to romance one another, like that's resolved within how many pages? Like maybe sort of like no more than like 40
By the end
pages.
of the first half, yeah, they're
Yes.
together. Like they've confessed their love to each other.
Yeah,
It's so
which
refreshing.
Which is the plot of most romance stories.
The series Toradora, which is a beloved anime about romance between, I think they might be middle schoolers. I didn't like it myself, but some people love it. But it's all about will they, won't they? And it's just, it's exhausting.
This is will they, and then like they did now how, which is much more interesting to me.
Yes.
So, yeah. And I think that's, again, that reflects one of the reasons why I think that this is such like a genuinely positive, kind of healthy story to take in, because it doesn't position kind of like the acquisition of a partner as being kind of the point of romance or like the end goal of romance. Like really, really quickly, it's just sort of like a done deal that Takeo and Yamato are together. That's it. Like, you know, they are going to stay together now.
Yes.
And then the book is just, and well, the series is then about, okay, what's it like sort of being together? And it's, you know, there's in all sort of media or fiction, but particularly within comics, I think that there is often a like an assumption that sort of stable, happy couples are boring to read about, or to, you know, sort of to hear stories about them, right? Like that is
right. There's be some sort of conflict that they need to,
which is nonsense.
It is, yeah, and it's that kind of thinking that leads you to Mephisto unmaking, you know, 5 months marriage.
I wasn't going to bring it up. I'm so bad about it, Cal.
But I think, you know, like I look at the story and I see like the amount of kind of just like wildly entertaining stories that you can wring out of people who very, very, very rarely sort of ever question whether or not they should be together, or you know, like the conflict is just about how to better themselves. It's not about, you know, like this, like it's such like an internally driven story. And I think, you know, yeah, like it makes me feel like it's very foolish when you have writers of, say, superhero comics saying, well, of course, yeah, they can't ever actually get together.
Can't do anything. Let me tell you, as a married person who's been trying to figure out how to move from apartment to apartment for the last week, there's a lot of drama inherent in that.
Come on.
There are many stories you could tell.
Yeah, does that run up to what happens if one half of a
what happens if one half of the pair went off to do a podcast for an hour?
I mean, I'd read a comic about that.
But, to be fair, Kat went to the garden this morning. We were both going to take some time off because we both had worked far too hard yesterday. So this is my time off.
Oh boy,
with you gentlemen, talking about other people's relationships.
Time well spent.
I was trying to sort of initially, I think before, I felt very confident that you would both enjoy this book because, as has already been established and I think agreed, this is the perfect book.
I'm willing to give it to you so far.
I mean, I was really confident that you'd both like it, but initially I was trying to work out like if I had to like pitch it or like, you know, persuade Matt in particular like why this is like a worthwhile book. And I think the best angle that I could come up with was like, what if like Jimmy Olsen got together with Lois Lane and like Superman was just like a side, like a peripheral book. And then Jimmy and Lois just had like a phenomenal time together. And I think there's something that's like so nice about like the just sort of seeing sort of like an unconventional pairing where I don't know, where like they're just taking pleasure in each other's company and just enthusiastic and affectionate towards one another. And it's just, I don't know, like there's so few things I can think of, like so few things I can think of that kind of meet that same brief.
I like that you felt the need to try to like explain it to me in superhero comics.
In comic book terms? Well, he knows you so well.
Well, no, I was actually thinking about it. Like between the two of you, actually, like I feel like both of you kind of pull at my tastes in different ways to where they like grow in certain directions. Like most of my, like a lot of my comics that I'm buying at this point are like Image comic stuff and not superhero comic stuff. And I can directly trace that to like our time swapping comics back and forth in Australia, Cal. And like when I came to this, I was like, oh, Pat's gonna love this book because like this is straight up like Patrick Fitzgerald Flex shit based on some of the stuff we've watched. So like, it's cool that like, to me, both of you are people who kind of like pull it by weird consolidated threads of taste and are like, hey, try this, hey, try that, and like. Like when I saw Cal recommend this thing, I was like, oh, they're both gonna love that.
Yeah, I am so excited, Cal. You really need to check out Wotakoi because I think you'll really appreciate it. It's very similar where they get to the point, they form a relationship, and it's more about them being otakus or nerds. So it's not that they're like physically different like Takeo, but it's them trying to figure out who they are in society and who they are together. It's really great. And they're older. So they're like our age, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, for some reason could not place that these people had just graduated middle school in this book, which maybe speaks to their emotional maturity. I don't know.
I think that's pretty standard in manga or anime that they look like, oh, are they 20? Oh, no, they're 14. What? Okay.
But also, Takeo is drawn in such a way that he looks like he might be 45.
Right, yeah.
But yes, no, I'm very excited to continue I'm excited to pick up on that recommendation because
yes, absolutely.
I have absolutely been sort of chasing the high of this book for about 3 years now, and nothing has come close.
I got very similar feels while reading this, so I think you'll enjoy it.
That is exceptionally exciting. Yes, I'm feeling very confident about that.
I guess, does anyone else have anything else that they'd like to say about My Love Story? I feel like we kind of nailed it. We had a perfect conversation about the perfect comic.
I'm really looking forward to reading all of it now.
Volume 2 is good, Pat, and also Volume 2's got more Suna stuff, which was my question at the end of this book. Was like, what is, like, to the point where, Cal, you don't have to spoil me if it's a spoiler. I've been avoiding having Kat answer this question for the last like half a month. Like, there's a part of me that thinks Suna's asexual?
He doesn't seem to care about romance as much.
I'll say it's an interesting question, and there is more content that relates to that as the goes along.
Well, there was like a hot minute where, for some reason, because of something Kat had said, while she was reading Volume 1, I was like, is it going to be a love triangle? Like, Suna actually secretly like loves Takeo?
Oh, I hope not.
And I was like, yeah. I don't think it will be, based on the additional stuff I've read, and also the fact that I don't think it would quite fit with the theme of the book too.
Him being asexual would be really, really interesting.
Yeah, that I could see potentially, and it would still fit, and it would be good because there are not enough asexual characters in comics that's underrepresented, I think.
But yeah, well, I'm very pleased that you both enjoyed it. That's immensely gratifying to me. So that's good, and I hope that anybody that listens to this and then reads it will also have a similar experience, because as I think has maybe been established, like I've placed like a high degree of certainty on like
the fact that everyone will love this book always.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't necessarily want to know what will happen if I'm confronted with
someone who I'm trying to think of, like, I could definitely see someone who just like, it's not their genre, or they're very quote unquote bro-y or something like that, and they just don't get it. But I think if you get it, you'll love it. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, definitely. And all that you've got to do is you've just got to like listen to the message of the book, right? Which is just about being yourself, and sort of it being excellent to care about things, and as long as you take that to heart, I can't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they'd be right. I could see someone having the opinion, and they would be wrong. Well, excellent. Cool. I think that's going to do it for this month's discussion of My Love Story Volume 1. As always, if you want to get in touch with Pat or myself, you can find us on Twitter as @thehypnotoad and @MattLedge, respectively. You can
didn't knock my name. I appreciate that.
Do you want me to? I can't.
No. Tradition.
You can also email us at waitingonthetrade@gmail.com. And read more comics related goodness at mattreadscomics.com. And I'm going to keep cutting Cal off until I say, Cal, where can people find you online, assuming that you want to be found?
Sorry, Betsy Inferno is where people can find me online.
Yeah, thanks, Cal. This was really great. I'm glad that we all managed to like make the time, because crossing the time zones is always difficult, and just like people's schedules. And it's Mother's Day. Did you guys know?
It is. Happy Mother's Day to mothers out there.
Not in the UK. Absolutely no gratitude here. So.
Okay. Well,
Do you guys have a Mother's Day, or is it just nothing?
No, it's just a barren wasteland. We have
just begrudging respect. It's fine.
Sure. emotional suppression day. But thank you very much for having me on. I've really enjoyed this, and
it's been great getting to talk to you, Cal.
Thank you very much.
To put a voice to the name that I've heard so many times of all the adventures in Australia and everything else. It's been great.
Good. Well, I'm pleased I didn't disappoint.
Thanks again to Cal for coming on to talk My Love Story with us. Join us next month when we'll be talking about Green Lantern Circle of Fire with guest host Simon Payne.